Hello and welcome back to this section on Charles Dickens's The Signalman. In this section that's there in front of you on the slide, you can see the anxiety of the signalman as it is narrated to the narrator. So, this anxiety can be both literal as well as symbolic of the anxieties that are running through the society because of the impact of scientific advancement and technological advances. So, first let us look at what is literally expressed in this particular point in the story. When it first stood under the danger light, the it referring to the spectre, of course, and the signalman is telling the narrator, his witness, as to how he first encountered the spectre. So, when it first stood under the danger light, he went on, putting his dark hair back from his head and drawing his hands outward across his temples in an extremity of feverish distress. Why not tell me where that accident was to happen, if it must happen? Why not tell me how it could be averted, if it could have been averted? When on its second coming it hid its face, why not tell me instead she is going to die? Let them keep her at home. If it came on those two occasions only to show me that its warnings were true, and so to prepare me for the third, why not warn me plainly now? And I, Lord, help me, a mere poor signalman on this solitary station. Why not go to somebody with credit to be believed and power to act? So, there are several things going on with respect to the position of the signalman and with respect to the anxiety that is coming through him because of his experiences with the spectre. So, let us see what is the status of the signalman. He says that I am just a insignificant man, I am just a mere poor signalman. So, in this hierarchy of social positions, he says that I am not very high up, I do not have credit enough to be believed. So, he wants the spectre to go to somebody who has authority, who has some position in society, so that this particular man who has experienced the spectre's presence could do something about the spectre's warnings. So, we can see that this spectre and his working class status is being reinforced. Even though this is about the supernatural business, we have something very tangible, something very concrete that is being addressed in this particular section of the story, and that is his powerlessness. This man is powerless and he is wondering why the spectre is haunting him, because he has no power over anything. So, that is what is being indicated in this section. Further, he also wonders why the spectre is not helping him out. So, if the spectre's job is to give some warning, he wonders he should, the spectre should have kind of given him some kind of concrete cues as to how to avert danger. So, he feels as if he is being played by the spectre as well. So, he is completely at the mercy of all these spiritual stuff too. So, the entire helplessness of the signalman is coming through. And as I pointed out earlier, the anxiety of the age is represented in the extremity of feverish distress that is being communicated by the signalman. So, even though he has a kind of a present distress, which is the appearance of the spectre for the third time, this distress can also be connected to the distress that is brought upon him because of these advancements, such as the engine itself, the train itself. Now, when the narrator kind of witnesses such a state of mind in the signalman, he wonders what to do. He says, when I saw him in this state, I saw that for the poor man's sake as well as for the public safety, what I had to do for the time was to compose his mind. Therefore, setting aside all question of reality or unreality between us, I represented to him that whoever thoroughly discharged his duty must do well, and that at least it was his comfort that he understood his duty, though he did not understand these confounding appearances. So, the narrator, he is very, very level-headed. in the face of this feverish anxiety. So, what we can see here is a contrast between, on the one side, this lower class figure who is the signalman versus this upper class gentleman who has a lot of leisure time, who can take walks, who can come down and have a chat with the signalman. So, we get a contrast between these two figures. On the one hand, one man is full of anxiety, the other is very level headed, and he also worries about the public safety. And he wonders what he could do to preserve the public, safeguard the public, and he realizes that the first thing he has to do was to compose the mind of this signalman. So, he is putting aside questions of the reality or the unreality of supernatural beings. He is not worried about that. Right now, what he is more worried about is the sanity of this man, because only when he is sane, he could prevent any further disaster, because he has a lot of responsibility in guiding the traffic of the trains. So, what he does is he tells him, please remember his duty, your duty, and when he talks about the duty of the signalman, he is able to bring down the anxiety of this working class figure, the signalman, because he is thoroughly faithful to his job, and he wants to carry out his job to the best possible ability. So, even though he is not able to, even the signalman is not able to understand, make much of these confounding appearances of the spectre, he is able to understand his duty very well, and that gives him a lot of composure. And the narrator tells us that in this effort I succeeded far better than in the attempt to reason him out of his conviction. So, his conviction about the presence of the spectre is something he cannot be told to give up. This man thoroughly believes in the spectre's appearance. The signalman believes that the spectre did appear 3 times to warn him, even though he is not very sure what exactly the warnings are. He is convinced about the appearance of the spectre, and even though the narrator is not able to make him disbelieve the spectre, he is able to convince him about the nature of his job and his responsibilities towards it, and the fact that he is very good at it. So, he became calm. The signalman becomes calm. The occupations incidental to his post as the night advanced began to make larger demands on his attention, and I left him at 2 in the morning. I had offered to stay through the night, but he would not hear of it. So, when the signalman becomes busy with the nitty-gritty details of his job, he is completely composed, and he is able to carry out his job properly. And the narrator feels better at leaving him at 2 o'clock in the morning. Even though he offers to stay, the signalman refuses to take him up on it. So, this is the state of affairs at the end of this particular night in the story. And what is very interesting is that we are kind of given a foreshadowing that things are going to go badly, because the signalman is on his own, and this stereotype is kind of played out, the stereotype that things will go really badly when you're all by yourself at night. And as the narrator is leaving the place, this set of narration tells us what exactly are the thoughts that are running through the mind of this particular narrator. That I more than once looked back at the red light as I ascended the pathway. So, he is making a climb uphill, that I did not like the red light, that I should have slept but poorly if my bed had been under it. I saw no reason to conceal, nor did I like the 2 sequences of the accident and the dead girl. I see no reason to conceal that either. So, the narrator is very disturbed as he is leaving this place. he is disturbed because of those two accidents that happened under the watch of this particular signalman. So, even though he is not directly responsible, the fact that these two things, the signalman and the accidents, are in proximity doesn't forebode well for the public safety as well as for the psyche of the signalman, and that's something which bothers this narrator. And the second thing is we can see the empathy of the narrator here. He is very empathetic. He says that I would not be happy to sleep under the glare of the red light. I would sleep but poorly if my bed had been under it. So, what he does is he puts himself in the shoes of the signalman. So, that trajectory of sympathy and empathy for this working class figure is something which is very interesting, and that is played out really very subtly in this particular story. And even though he is worried about the psyche of this signalman, he is also very, very clear that the working conditions of this particular man is not ideal at all. And we are also given a sense that he is kind of climbing up from the underbelly of the society. So, it is a very symbolic climb too. He seems to have come down in terms of the level of civilization, and he is climbing back onto it, and whereas this particular man, the signalman, is kind of caught behind, he is left behind, and that doesn't seem right. But what ran most in my thoughts was the consideration, how ought I to act having become the recipient of this disclosure? I had proved the man to be intelligent, vigilant, painstaking and exact, but how long might he remain so in his state of mind? Though in a subordinate position, still he held a most important trust. Would I, for instance, like to stake my own life on the chances of his continuing to execute it with precision? So, we can see this internal monologue going on inside the mind of the narrator as he is climbing up this steep pathway back to civilized society. And the most important question that's running through his mind is, what should I do now that I know about this signalman's experiences with the spectre? And even though this particular narrator has himself told us, the readers, that this man is intelligent, he is very, very vigilant, he is painstaking, he is very, very meticulous and exact in his work, can we also trust his state of mind now that he has told us about the presence of the spectres at periodic times? And he wonders if the narrator, he wonders if he himself would put his life in his care because of the disturbances of his mind. So, this signalman has a lot of public safety in his hands, and now that he is disturbed, would he be the proper man, would he be the correct man to take care of it further down in his position? So, these are all the thoughts that are running through his mind, and he wonders what to do. So, he is caught, even though he is sympathetic, he thinks that he has to do something to protect the safety of the public. And please take note that this subordinate position is constantly also pointed out. This signalman is in a lower position, a subordinate position in the hierarchy of jobs that are there, as well as in the hierarchy of classes that are there in Victorian society. So, despite the fact that he is in a subordinate position, he has a lot of responsibility. So, it is very ironical that this lower class figure has a lot of importance and significance, and he is responsible for the the continuation of the public safety, especially when they are being transported through the trains. Unable to overcome a feeling that there would be something treacherous in my communicating what he had told me to his superiors in the company, without first being plain with himself and proposing a middle course to him, I ultimately resolved to offer to accompany him, otherwise keeping his secret for the present, to the wisest medical practitioner we could hear of in those parts, and to take his opinion. So, we have a solution from the narrator. And once again we can draw a contrast between the narrator and the signalman. This signalman is at a loss, he is at a complete loss as to how to resolve this crisis, whereas we have the narrator who has come up with a solution, that is, take this man to a doctor, a medical practitioner, and he thinks that it would be wrong in him to communicate these affairs to the superior of the signalman. That would be treacherous, he says. So you can see a lot of personal integrity coming through in his characterization. So he wants to keep the faith with his new friend, and he believes that the right course of action would be to talk to him and take him to a medical practitioner, and they could keep the secret of the spectre for a little while until we know until they could know what to do about these occurrences. So we can see that there is a lot of contrast and characterization coming through in the study of these two figures, and we also see that this narrator is taking the side of the signalman and not the side of this company, because he is not ready to reveal the true set of affairs that are at the backdrop of the signalman's condition. Next evening was a lovely evening, and I walked out early to enjoy it. The sun was not yet quite down when I traversed the field path near the top of the deep cutting. I would extend my walk for an hour. I said to myself, half an hour on and half an hour back, and it would then be time to go to my signalman's box. So this description is of the evening that the narrator spends by taking a walk. And look at the description. I think for the first time in the story we have a kind of a relief from the depths of the deep cutting. We have a beautiful reference to the evening, and there are references to the narrator taking a walk, and it's like a breath of fresh air, and that is being enjoyed and is also being described as being experienced by the narrator. We don't have such a description in conjunction with the signalman, even though he says that sometimes he takes a walk. We don't have it described in the story. We have that description only in the context of the narrator, and that's something that's an indication that such lovely experiences are the privilege of the wealthy and the upper class. So the sun is not yet quite down when the narrator goes back to the top of the deep cutting, and he says that he would extend his walk for another hour, and then it would be time for him to go to the signalman's box. And look at the possessive pronoun there, my signalman's box. There is a kind of an affinity that's kind of developed between this narrator and the signalman, and that is indicated in the narrative of this particular narrator, the wealthy narrator. And he is kind of waiting to meet him. He's eager to meet him, and that kind of increases the anticipation not only for him but also for the readers who are trying to identify with this very rational narrator, very reasonable and a narrator who's full of integrity and honesty, and who's kind of ready to help, offer a helping hand to this signalman who is in need of help. Thank you for watching. I'll continue in the next session.